my brief really was to talk about whether we'd taken back control. Well, and I actually spent 10 minutes thinking about this, and about an hour trying to find where we'd taken back control. The question, sadly, is that the answer is we haven't taken control of anything. The lunatics have taken control. I'll follow you now. However, on trade, on borders, if you actually look at the immigration white paper, I was taking this in a scholarly, serious way. If you look at the immigration white paper, well, actually, other than registering people coming in, and I think it's scandalous. By the way, I was one of the victims of, I've been here 60 years, settled status. And do you realise, hey, I'm on TV, I'm on the radio, they know who the hell I am. I even work for the Russians. But I hate Putin. But in all seriousness, they demanded to see my passport to prove that I was who I said I was. In all seriousness, I think that we haven't taken back control at all. As Michael said, our constitutional arrangements have been completely turned upside down. The Brexit process has really risked the unity of this country, without a doubt. I think on borders, it's a joke, frankly. They've suddenly woken up to the fact that it's one thing to... by the way, we were never part of Schengen.
Yes, absolutely.
As far as I can remember, I've always had to show my passport when I've come to this country and somebody's noted me coming in. But that's an aside, right? The immigration white paper is a joke. They've realised that actually we do need foreign labour, though it's interesting that skilled labour is defined as earning £30,000 or more, and they've suddenly discovered that actually that's for a 5-year visa. Now, we don't know whether that's renewable or not. That's not clear. So, the immigration stuff. But remember, I mentioned immigration and borders because, of course, that was the great pillar of the defeat, and we have to acknowledge it was a defeat, in 2016. But it's interesting that the great pillar, that they built this great edifice of global Britain, that we were going to do this, that and the other, actually when it comes down to it, it's a bit of a damp squid. Because there is a general acknowledgement 2 years after that actually we do need foreign labour, low skill and high skill. You may want to regulate, and there's not a problem in my view, and I'm one of those people who is registered and has to register. I don't see the problem in registering people. Just as an aside, by the way, if you want to come, the white paper says, if you want to come in as low skill for a year, you only get a visa for a year, of course, but you don't need a job. You can come and look for work. Now, I thought to myself, hell, what have I learnt in EU law? What have I been teaching my students? That actually the treaty confers a right on me to move to look for work. Oh, our immigration policy was going to be this brand new departure, and it isn't at all, actually. And personally, I don't want it to be, but that's me. So on immigration, on trade, it's a joke, basically. We have a Customs Act and a Trade Act that essentially, when we leave, if we leave, simply, a little bit like Withdrawal Act, changes the label of the treaties that we're already involved in, or of the rules we're involved in. So, baked beans, Heinz, change Heinz to, I don't know, Morrison's. But the contents remain the same. But of course, as Gove gave the game away, and Gove is actually a very, very smart little cookie. He fancies himself as the next Tory leader. That's why he's staying loyal. If there is a Conservative Party to lead, because I don't agree. I actually think the Conservative Party, you'll know from your history of this country that the Conservative Party every 100 years or so, or every 60 or 70 years, tends to split on some issue or other. And I actually think they could do. So on trade, there's nothing there, frankly. We haven't taken back control, though of course I'm no psychiatrist, but if you keep telling yourself that you've taken back control by simply changing the label on a product, then you've taken back control. I decide. Even though I'm deciding what's already been decided. Collectively, I decide. So, frankly, we've lost control, that's for sure. Right? We've lost control because actually we're regarded as a bit of a laughing stock in Europe, even though everybody loves us and wants to stay in, though we mustn't get too carried away with that, because there are many people in Europe who are actually fed up with the Brits. What was really revealing, actually, was not only in Brussels and elsewhere, but what was really revealing was what the Norwegians were saying about us joining the EEA. And EFTA. Why? What makes you think we want you in this?
Yes.
You already messed up the European Union. So again, we mustn't, one of the things that really gets me is this discourse of imperial delusion, as I called it. Right? That somehow we can impose our will on the world and the world will bend. And I have to say that many in Parliament also fall for that. I know we have to talk up things, but we've got to be careful that the narrative we produce for people can actually be very, very harmful. It evades reality, the realism that you were talking about. Right? So we've lost control. We've lost our purchase in Brussels. I think they've given up on us, frankly.
Not quite.
Well...
Yeah, we'll do
Let's leave it at that. So there are many who want us to leave. I think the fundamental question really is how, and I think you were alluding to this, Michael. How do we reverse the 2016 referendum without undermining or questioning, even though it was on a lie? The fact is, the result is the result. We can't, like I say to my students or my staff, actually not my students, you can't choose the feedback you get from your students. You have to live with it. That's the sad fact. But you see, I don't blame just Cameron. I blame Brown and I blame Blair. And really, I go back 50 years. The general approach to membership of the European Union in this country has been crab-like, as I described it. We go forward by going sideways. We never embrace. We still suffer from that post-imperial delusions of grandeur. Right? The French do to a certain extent, but not to the same extent. They've been far smarter. So how do you reverse 2016 without calling into doubt the good faith of the people who voted to leave, even though they may have voted on a lie? I, and colleagues who here will know that I've said this before, I've always felt that a referendum that simply came along without a general election, first of all, would be a mistake. And I know that there's pressure for it, but I don't think it'll happen. I think your front bench don't want it unless they're really forced to. I actually think something else will happen. I actually think the Tories will ditch the Prime Minister. Right? Because she's going to come back with nothing. And ultimately, people like Grieve, Morgan and others are saying that this isn't about party interests. And I think to think about it in traditional party political terms actually is a mistake. I think that when sharp comes to push, we don't have men in grey suits anymore, do we?
Plenty of them.
Yeah, there are, but mine's blue, but not because of my political colour, of course. But I think that they've done that. And really, she is the key. The Conservative Party is not dominated by rabid Brexiteers. Not completely. There's 50 or 60 of them, really. I think most of them are loyalists, and then there's a band of Remainers. I think that when on the 29th she comes along and doesn't pull some monkey, what do you call them? Rabbit out of a hat, I think that she will disappear. I know that you're all enamored with this idea, and here we part company, I think, Michael, that the Tories have this instinct for power that they'll hang together. We're talking about fundamental ideological differences here, and I think we have two parties. I called one the Conservative Unionist Party and the other one the Conservative Nationalist Party, which I think Boris will join. So I think that she will disappear. The question then is what happens after she disappears? And here I think it's your front bench that has to be smart. I think the position of the Labour Party on this is clear now. It's taken some of you a heck of a lot of hard work and Keir Starmer in particular, to get your leader, who is fundamentally an reconstituted socialist nationalist of the Mitterrand ilk.
That's being genuine.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, we'll give it. No.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry to butt in, but that is just complete bullshit.
Let me finish.
I'm sorry. I apologise.
Let me finish, and then I will answer your question. I think the problem is that whilst I agree, and I have to analyse the guy every week, basically, whilst I agree that on social and other policies, there's little that he says that I disagree with, frankly. However, on Europe, I think he's had to be dragged, kicking and screaming, and if you talk to his MPs, they'll tell you that that's the case, to the position he's in. So I think that the Labour Party position now is clearer than it's ever been. I think the media are making a mistake and pretending it isn't now. You want to stay in the customs union? I read the amendment. It's not
the customs union, a new customs union.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt.
The questions are, let the man finish, you know what I mean? Chill
Right,
out.
a customs union.
That's what
New customs union.
Well,
Specific.
What new customs union?
Sorry,
That's
but
not got
this
it
is what
happening.
we hear on the radio all the time.
Shall we let
There will be questions at the end. Can you all please be quiet when the speakers finish first? Questions at the end.
right. So the position, as far as I'm concerned, the position of the Labour Party is clearer than it's ever been. They don't want to exit without a deal. I think they've come around to the view, and certainly Keir Starmer's and others, that there will have to be an extension to Article 50. I'm not so sure that they want to withdraw it because of the legitimacy problem. They want to remain aligned in regulatory terms. The big challenge with that position is how can a country with 60 million people be rule takers fundamentally and play no role in making the rules? But as always in this saga, my view is that May will fall. My view is that Parliament will assert itself. I won't bet with you, Michael, because the last time we had a bet, do you remember, 20 odd years ago, 1994. I still owe you a pint, but the French referendum. No.
16.
Yeah. So I think everything will change on the 29th. Because I think there'll be enough people in her party who will realise that basically she has blocked the whole process and the whole system. And I do believe that if we take the two votes in Parliament over the finance bill and then subsequently, those are the majorities for the kind of soft Brexit deal that are on the table. I think Brussels will grant us an extension. Why? Because the political circumstances in this country will have changed fundamentally. So if they won't have done if what we go down the route of is May tinkering. Right? That's dead.
I know.
Right? So that's the only thing that will act, if you like, as a catalyst for, I think, your third option of a renegotiated, negotiating a second deal that is fundamentally different and has the elements that I think the Labour Party is of the view that they want, and I think the Remain soft Brexiteers and the Conservative Party. The SNP are on board in any event, so are all the small nationalist parties. Now, I could be completely wrong, but that is not a particularly clear way out of things, but it's certainly, in my view, the only possible way out. Now, whether we have an election before the European elections, and the European elections, if we extend the process, and we have to do that fairly quickly, will then become a proxy for the kind of relationship we want with the European Union, that we want to negotiate. And I think that they're the political parties, and that's where I think you'll probably see a split in the Conservative Party for the first time, where you will see the parties seeking, through the European elections, a kind of mandate that they can stand on. But I do think that, sadly, because I don't want it to happen, I think that some kind of Brexit will happen. The question is how quickly you can reverse it, how can you soften it, how can you ensure that many of the obstacles that you pointed to are actually overcome. And that's it.